Welcome to the Rutgers Jewish Film Festival. Today we are recording in front of a live audience. I'm Karen Small, I'm the director of the festival, and I'm delighted to be speaking today with Arkadij Khaet, the director of Masel Cocktail.
Thank you.
Arkadij was born in the Republic of Moldova just before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and his family immigrated to Germany when he was a baby. After graduating from high school, he lived in Israel and then moved to Cologne to start his undergraduate studies in film and television. As a student, he began to undertake film projects, often with his colleague and co-director, Mickey Paatzsch, who is the co-director on Masel Cocktail. Arkadij, we are so happy to have you with us here today. We have a terrific audience. I don't think you can see them, but they just watched the film and I'm delighted to share it with them. So I'm going to ask some questions and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So welcome. And just to start off, can you tell us about the idea for this film? How did that come about? What was the process behind it?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me and thank you for also introducing me. And hello from Germany, West Germany, a place called Duisburg, a very not too big town in west of Germany. And just like for me to imagine like how many people are actually listening in the cinema right now, because I see only you.
You see me. We have about 40 people with us today.
Okay, cool. So just from my imagination. So hi everyone. Yeah. So how did this film come about? I would start with saying that my biography is very much linked, of course, to the protagonist of the film and also to the film itself. I mean, I was born, like you said, in the former Soviet Union, and my parents immigrated to Germany as Jewish quota, so-called Jewish quota refugees. We came to the Ruhr area where I'm actually right now. And I would say the film, with the film, we tried to communicate a feeling, what is it like to feel Jewish in Germany nowadays, okay? From a very subjective Jewish point of view. You know, I grew up in Germany and there are all these people you meet, maybe not on a daily basis, but on a monthly, on a weekly, on a yearly basis. And in all these people have an opinion about like Jewish life, about Jews, about Judaism. And I kind of try to portray the people you always meet again and again from this Jewish perspective as a Jew growing up in Germany. You know, in the script writing process, we call the people Dima meets in a day, we call them the archetypes in the German Jewish dialogue. And but back to my biography. So I grew up in Germany and I started to study film. And you know, there in film schools, there are always professors who tell you, do something personal, do something from your life experience, you know, something you know how to talk about. And I thought, okay, let's shoot this film. Let's do a film from this Jewish perspective. And I would say also the experience of what do Germans actually know about Jewish life, right? Except Hitler, Holocaust, and anti-Semitism. And the truth is that like Germans don't know much, you know? If you ask in Germany, like how many Jews do live here, where are the Jews coming from, they won't have a clue. When you speak in Germany about Jewish life, you normally speak about dead Jews, okay? So growing up in Germany, you feel most of the time like a name on a memorial, you know? So we wanted to make a film about this topic, a film we would like to see ourselves about this topic. And also we wanted to talk about the German Russian speaking Jewish community, which makes the vast majority of Jews living in Germany today, more than 90%, as also said in the film, and which is not portrayed in German cinema or film at all. You know, we never see migrant Jewish characters in German film. So the Russian speaking migrant Jewish community is not represented. So I just thought let's shoot a short about it.
And so effective by shooting the film as a day in the life of Dmitry.
Yeah.
Because all these things that we talked last week didn't happen to you in one day. So
Yeah.
can you talk about that a little bit more? How did that come to be, to create it as a day for Dimitri? And also about, I was curious if any of your friends or people that you know or Jews in Germany objected to the way that you portrayed, you chose to portray Jews in Germany and through this film.
I would say, like, I didn't expect it, but the feedback, like, especially from the Jewish community in Germany, was very, very positive. And I think, like, many, like, especially young Jews from the generation who grew up in Germany, felt like it's the first time maybe a film is speaking from their perspective and communicates their feelings. You know, as a Jew in Germany, there's always this reduction to dead Jews. You know, the basic problem is the only reason why Jews in Germany are talked about is the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, as I said. The Germans know the Jews only from the position, we're the perpetrators, you're the victims, and German major society approaches Jewish culture only through that, if they approach it at all. So I would say, like, you know, in German press media always or very often have been written that it's a satirical film. And I would say the satirical fact about it is that Dima meets all these people in a day. But if we would portray Dima, you know, over a year, he would also meet all these people and wouldn't be so satirical. So I've met all these people, and, you know, for example, the character of the teacher, of Dima's teacher, was the easiest character to write, because, like, I knew her so well. I had this teacher in my school, and I met, like, this kind of person so many times. Yeah, and I think also what you said about, like, the Jewish community, how they felt about the film. You know, the cinematic visibility of Jews in German cinema is very much linked to the Shoah and to a religious recognizability. So in German films, the Shoah is formative for the biography and the psychology of the characters. And so the most present picture image of Jews after 1945 is the one of the victims of the Shoah. And there is this, like, visual construction of Jewishness through religion. So Jews had have a very limited repertoire in German film. But I feel like this range is changing due to more young native German Jewish voices. You know, so most of the people living in Germany, of course, they're not religious. They don't wear a kippah. They rather wear, you know, like Dima, a hat. They don't listen to klezmer all day long. And they also have a different perspective than what German society expects to be, because they're not necessarily the victims of the Shoah, but they are the ones who fought against the Nazis and the ones who won the war. You know, in Jewish community, when I was little, I remember that, like, the 8th of May, the end of the war, was more or higher celebrated than the 9th of November. So the so-called Reichspogrom or Reichskristallnacht in Germany. So it's
the Kristallnacht, is that what you're?
Yeah, Kristallnacht, yeah. And all the veterans were sitting there with their medals from the Russian army. So it's a different perspective, which is not, like, really known or really heard in Germany. Because I would say Jews in Germany are assigned with a certain role. You know, a good Jew in German society is the one who takes away the weight from the German shoulders and proves them that they became good and Jewish life is safe in Germany and it can prosper. And a bad Jew is like Dima, you know, is an aggressive Jew who doesn't fit into this rehearsed theater.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That is so interesting. And just to think about, as a film festival, when we look at films and we see how Jews are portrayed on film, they're usually pretty visually identified as Jewish, either with religious clothing or in a religious community or the Holocaust in its own identification. So to think about, well, how do you show on film Jews who are not in those two categories, but living their lives, part of society, contributing to society in different ways, it's a very different kind of, and you're the filmmaker, so that's your challenge.
Yeah, but I'm also faced here with sometimes with the dilemma, you know, because of course filmmaking is a very visual medium, so it's hard to portray like a Jewish character without him wearing a kippah or having an Israeli flag in the background or any religious symbols or speaking about the Holocaust or anti-Semitism. But truth is that like Jewish life looks totally different in Germany nowadays. You know, it's completely secular. More than 95%, like religious Judaism in Germany exists in like very, very low numbers. Also, it's not necessarily Zionistic in Germany. Also, it's not, you know, not like Dima says in the film, he doesn't wake up every day and thinks he's Jewish. So like, you know, Jewish people can speak about so many different things, but they are only visible when they speak about anti-Semitism or the past, right? So yeah, it's a dilemma and it's complicated, and I'm facing this like every time because like, of course, I'm working on other Jewish scripts and stuff, and it's complicated, yeah.
It's complicated. Well, your decision in the film to create the black and white scenes, right, which represented, as you said, the Jewish movie, what might have been a Jewish movie, and those pauses, and then Dimitri turning and speaking to the camera, so we could hear his thoughts as opposed, right? That was such an unusual type of filmmaking and techniques to use. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Oh, and I wanted to say, as we were previewing the film in advance, we had to keep reminding ourselves, this is not a documentary. This is not the director talking to us. This is an actor, right? But you have that feel of this is actually happening to him and this is his story. So could you talk a little bit more about that? And actually maybe you could tell us a little bit about the actor and how you found him.
For sure. So first of all, it was also very, it was an experiment for me and also for Mickey, who is the co-director. We never did the film like that before, you know, all we did was like very classic narrative fiction cinema. So it was also an experiment. The first time we kind of broke the fourth wall and we did like all the things with the facts and, you know, this cocktail of archive footage and stuff. But I think it all came naturally. In the beginning, we just wrote, before we had the script, we just wrote monologues under the premise, what would we like to say from a Jewish perspective to a so-called major society if we would have 30 minutes time. So we just wrote monologues. Before there was the character of Dima, we just wrote monologues and they were angry and they were kind of also sometimes also mean. So we had just pages of monologues. And after that, we tried to find, you know, other characters where we build scenes around. But, you know, always you can go there and say, okay, now let's put the monologues into dialogues. But we just thought, so if he addresses the audience and the society, let's try to break the fourth wall and let's try to let him speak to the camera. And it was a lot of rehearsing and trying out and failing till we had like, you know, the form of the film. And I think one of the biggest challenges in this whole process was finding Alexander Wertmann, who is the actor for Dima. Because from the beginning we said, okay, it's written from a Jewish perspective, let's have also like a Jewish actor playing it. Not from, you know, not for symbolic reasons or identity politics reasons. We just thought, just from a director's perspective, someone who actually experienced these situations in his life, growing up in Germany and being Jewish in Germany, he will know exactly what we are talking about, because it's kind of hard to communicate to someone who's not Jewish, who never met like this kind of people, what we're actually trying to say with the film and how does it feel to be othered and how does it feel to face anti-Semitism. So, you know, we had to find someone who is Jewish, who speaks Russian, who is in the right age and who is in the end a good actor. And in Germany, having around 200,000 Jews in the whole country, it's quite hard. So we're searching and looking for an actor and we couldn't find anyone. And it was just like, you know, it was just luck that we found Alexander Wertmann. He was accepted in a Jewish scholarship where I'm a scholar in. And I just read, you know, they sent a newsletter mail and it said, we have a we have new scholars, and it said Alexander Wertmann, first year acting school, Berlin. And I just called him and explained who I am and what we want. And I have to say, he's a very shy guy. He's very shy and he's very, you know, kind of, he doesn't put himself in the front. So we had kind of to, yeah, to tell him, like, to speak to him for a long time that he comes to the casting. And he told us, like, he's completely unexperienced in film. He did theater for the last 5 years, but he never stood in front of a camera. So to be honest, the casting was pretty bad because he performed Dima, you know, with like theater acting, like he's in a Shakespeare play. And it was pretty bad. But at the same time, like, he read the script like no one else from the actors we casted before, and he understood it, and he could speak from his own experience about every scene in the book. And he was also a very, you know, we knew we need someone who is very much liked by the audience from the first minute, a sympathetic guy, someone who is charming. And, you know, you have this, some people, they come into a room and you have a feeling that you like them. And this is exactly the fact about Alexander Wertmann, because like the film can move or switch to a very, very like arrogant kind of feeling, you know, from the main protagonist, because like he's like speaking from above and like teaching you, and he's kind of also mean sometimes to the audience. So we knew we need someone who actually the audience likes. And so we thought, okay, let's give it a try, because like he understood it very well, and we saw very fast he's very talented, you know. We just had to explain to him that like theater acting is different from film acting, and like he should, the pronunciation, do less with his eyes, with his eyebrows and stuff like that. And then we were rehearsing for many, many weeks, and I'm very much happy that we found him, and he's a great guy also behind the camera, not also in front.
Well, we're happy you found him also. He's terrific. Really, really wonderful in the part. I'm just going to remind the audience that if you have a question, I'm going to be calling on you soon and you'll raise your hand. So just get ready for that. Arkadij, in the filmmaking process and with Alexander, maybe he's the answer to my question. What surprised you the most in making this film? And in this whole process that you've been describing to us, from creating the monologues to turning it into a film and making these various decisions, is there something you would want to share with us that really surprised you as the filmmaker?
You know, in the filmmaking process, I'm not sure. I was very much surprised that it actually works the way we thought it could work. You know, like mixing all this like documentary material and the numbers and the facts with the other material was quite surprising. But I think the biggest surprise was in the reception of the film. You know, once we started, because I remember ourselves how nervous we were before the premiere, because like the film is quite confrontative, especially in Germany, and it's I thought if the film will be successful in Germany, because it's so loaded with German Jewish themes and problems. And it was extremely surprising for me winning like audience awards in places like Japan, in Kyoto, or in Mumbai in India. I thought, like, what are people going to understand, like in places, you know, like India, where no Jews, or in Southeast Asia or South America? It was very like surprising for me that it was internationally so successful. And then I understood from like also traveling around and like speaking with people, and sometimes people write you on Instagram or Facebook, that like people are watching the film and they are very much empathic with Dima, with the protagonist, because like other minorities or marginalized groups, doesn't matter where they are in the world, they have the similar feelings of being reduced, of cliche thinking, of projections. And also with this film, we are going, sometimes we have like screenings in schools, and in Germany, especially in West Germany, there's a big kind of Muslim population, and many like, you know, Muslim pupils in schools. And it's so interesting for me to see, you know, Muslim audience like very much understanding Dima. And this film is being played in many like Muslim film festivals right now. And this is like very much interesting because, you know, there's always this like debate between like Jews and Muslims and Arab population. And it's so interesting like that the film is being shown in a mosque. And like, you know, the youth from the mosque is, is kind of cheering up for this film. That's interesting. Yeah.
That is very interesting. Wow. So if you have a question from the audience, could you raise your hand? And I think I'm going to have to repeat the questions. I don't know if Arkadij will hear you. Joe.
Arkadij, you spoke about how it's received all over the world. You haven't said how it's received by Germans.
Did you hear the question? So he'd like to hear more about how the film was received by Germans in Germany.
Yeah, that's also an interesting question because I think it was received too good, you know. And what I mean by saying that is that, like I said, we're quite nervous before the premiere because like it's kind of also provoking and provocative to film, and there was almost till today we won like many awards in Germany. It has been screened on TV. We won the National Film Award with this short, and it was I became quite skeptical, you know, over the whole society, you know, hugging this film and telling us how great it is, because of course I always ask myself how many Jew lovers, Frau Yachthubers, are sitting in the juries awarding this film. And that almost like there was almost no negative criticism to this film, which is, you know, how relevant is a satire if it doesn't make anyone angry, you know? So, and I asked myself if we failed with this film or if we served so-called, I would say, like German Jewish fetishism, you know, which definitely exists in Germany. But I also don't want to argue against our own film because it was like, yeah, it was highly like, you know, reviewed in Germany in many places, and I really believe that like many people actually liked it, and also that like humor is a way to, you know, unshackle things and like also start discussions. In many screenings in Germany, people come up to us after the screening and say, I'm this guy, or I'm that woman from the film, you know. So they find themselves in this in the German non-Jewish characters. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. Another question from the audience, Ali. Can you speak louder?
Can you hear me? Okay. Arkadij just mentioned the idea of humor, right? Humor and acceptance of gallows humor is not something that we're always so comfortable portraying or using when talking about anti-Semitism. And I'm curious, in terms of the research that you did, the youth in Germany right now, do they still really feel the burden of kind of heaviness of the war, or is some of what they're doing starting to feel that we're not so responsible? One of the really grabbing scenes for me was when the
Can you hear this?
breakdancing on the waves.
So Ali, he can't hear you. So let me repeat a little bit of that for Arkadij. So she was talking about the gallows humor, and we don't often talk about anti-Semitism so much with humor. And I think our main question is about youth in Germany today. And you're talking about not Jewish youth, German youth.
I'm talking about Jewish youth.
Jewish youth in Germany. Do Jewish youth in Germany still feel the heaviness and burden of the Holocaust and the kind of victimhood?
Or are they more likely to be a bit irreverent about it? And a bit more like,
have they reached a point where they're more irreverent?
Sorry, you were lagging for the last like 30 seconds. So could you repeat like in all? I couldn't hear because the internet connection.
Yeah, I'm thinking for further questions, maybe I'll ask people just to stand up and I'll pass the microphone to you because we can just share it that way. That might work better. Jewish youth in Germany today, are they still feeling that the Holocaust sort of cast a shadow over their lives and over life in Germany as young Jews? Or have they reached a point where either they're not so concerned about it, or that's their parents or grandparents' issues? Can you talk a little bit about the German youth today?
The German Jewish youth.
German Jewish youth, yes.
And what you mean by this question, if how they're affected by the remembrance of the Holocaust, or how they're affected by anti-Semitism in Germany, or how they're affected actually by making their own perspectives visible, you know? These are different things.
Well, sure, and I think, and Ali, I don't want to guess, but I think we're all kind of thinking about, well, here's this film about anti-Semitism that really shows a young Jew and kind of a new Jew, as we talk about him, and how he doesn't want that to be the overarching identifier for him as a young person in Germany, and Jewish is a little bit of an aside for him. And is that the general perspective, would you say, from German youth, German Jewish youth?
Yeah.
Or do they feel very closely aligned to this idea of the Holocaust overshadows everything?
Yeah. So this is a complicated question, but I would start with saying, from 1945 till the 90s, there were around 25,000 Jews living in all of Germany. So the Russian-Soviet migration after the collapse of the Soviet Union brought 200,000 people extra to Germany. So the Jewish community became they became larger than 7 times larger or 8 times larger. And of course, my parents' generation, they had problems with finding a work, learning the language, migration problems and difficulties as every migrant generation. And right now, I would say there is a change in generation, because it's actually a first generation in Germany, growing up in Germany after the war, which is quite self-confident, because they were born in Germany, or they came as very little kids to Germany, as I did. We went through German education system, and we are privileged enough to doing decadent films things like study film, or writing books, or going into journalism, or going into politics. So the voices of this young Jewish generation, the voice is quite loud, and it's loud in different fields. It's not only loud in cinema, it's also loud in art in general, or in politics, or like I said, in journalism. And it's the first time, I would say, in Germany that there is a shift in perception of Jewish life right now. And I would say it's a very much general feeling by young Jewish generation that you don't want to speak only about anti-Semitism, about the Holocaust, that you have a self-confident Jewish life in Germany. And they try to reshape the perception of what does it mean to be Jewish in Germany right now. I would say that in general. And I would say that a big German newspaper published, I think 3 days ago, an article with the headline saying, "The Anger Jews." And it speaks exactly about this young generation of Jews which don't want to fit into this rehearsed theater and just be the people who stand at memorials and say yes to every never again a politician is speaking, I would say, because they don't want to be just in the function to serve the German society as the Jews they resettled here. Yeah.
Do you have another question? Billy.
What are you working on now? New project that you're working on? Also, I just love the film. Don't take that as a criticism.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that. I'll switch the order though. Of how much he loved the film, this gentleman, Billy, thank you. He loves the film. Don't take that as a criticism. And he'd like to know about the next project that you're working on.
Next project, yeah, I'm working on a feature, but I'm working on different things. I did a documentary about another cliche, which non-Jews and Jews can agree on. It's Jewish humor, you know, and we also try to deconstruct this like Jewish humor cliche in a documentary film, which will be streamed in next week, goes on air in German television. But also, you know, what is interesting about this is that I'm facing the same problem Dima faces in the film. The reduction to Jewish themes in film industry in Germany. So I'm getting offers by Jewish this, Jewish that, documentary series. And I feel like, you know, also my identity is multiple and fluid. I also want to talk about something else than only Jewish life and Jews. And, you know, actually we did this film because the most common question you have to answer in Germany as a Jew is, what is it like to be Jewish in Germany? So I thought, let's just do a film so no one's going to bother us anymore with this question. And
so you make sure the film is on your phone, and when you meet new people, just show them the film, then they get it.
Yeah, I mean, we failed because like since the film is out, I'm sitting like in situations like this, but also in like German speaking situations, and I speak about Jewish German life and Jewish identity in Germany. So I think the next project will have nothing to do with Jews or Jewish life. So the feature I'm working on is right now, I'm working with Mickey, the co-director, who is actually sitting next room. We're sharing a flat, and he's working on a script, and I will join him after this talk. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Judy.
The first thing I wanted to say is that everything in the film, I grew up exactly like that in a small town in Minnesota, where we were the only Jewish family. The second thing I wanted to ask is, you know, if the anti-Semitism may be more subtle now, but I was talking to people who had come, who lived in Germany, who were Turkish, and they had a very big problem. I don't know now, but a few years ago, they had a very big problem with the Turkish population getting the anti-Turkish from the Germans in Germany today. And I was wondering if it went from anti-Semitism to anti-another group.
Okay, so I'll try to summarize. The question is that if anti-Semitism seems to be more subtle in Germany today, is the discrimination against other immigrant groups in Germany growing and more visible? For example, the Turkish immigrants.
Yeah. So yes and yes, or no and yes. First of all, I would say that like the anti-Semitism in German society is quite stable since 1945 for the last, 70 years. So, in Germany, there is this like narrative of the denazification took place and all the Nazis are gone. And we kind of, we are the world champions of remembering. In Germany, there is this word like culture of remembrance, which is like pretty big in Germany. So most Germans were busy remembering the past and putting up memorials to immunize themselves for the present in a way. Yet the country of this world champions of coping with the past have around 25% of people with anti-Semitic views. And this is stable for the last 70 years, So the German past is not a past, it's a present. And at the same time, is by saying that like it's the numbers of anti-Semites in Germany are stable, there is a shift in the political stage in Germany. So right-wing populist parties raised to power. It happened first time 5 years ago with the AfD, the right-wing nationalist party joining the parliament in Germany. And also you feel how, things which were very much like a taboo to speak out openly, they are becoming more and more sayable on open stages. So at the same time, this right-wing populist parties they use kind of their Jew love or their philo-Semitism, which is a masking of racism and against migrants or people with a migration background. So what they are saying is we have to protect the Jews because of, for example, Muslim anti-Semitism and the refugee waves coming to Germany, and saying that definitely anti-Semitism also from the Muslim community exists, and also from the refugee community who came to Germany exists. But it's like comparing it to the numbers of right-wing extremism in Germany, it's not so important. It is important, but like the numbers of like, you know, right-wing anti-Semitism is much, much higher. And also, of course, like terror attacks and like people, racism in Germany raised like tremendously in the last 6 years since the migration of more than 1 million people from Syria, from Iraq. Now we're expecting a migration wave from Afghanistan after what happened there. And I feel always like Jews in general have a privileged position in Germany to speak, because they are listened to on a political level, you know, because of especially German past and German history. So we even have more responsibility to raise our voices also for other groups, you know, which are marginalized in German society. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I saw one last question, Rabbi Miller.
You focused on the memorial squares at the end of the film, and I felt that there was a reason that you did beyond just the washing of the squares. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what that meant for you, and what you think the German youngsters washing those squares means for Jews and for Germans today?
Could you hear that question? Oh, Arkadij, I thought you were first. Could you hear the question?
No, I didn't hear it.
Okay, so at the end of the film, you focused on the memorial stones in the pavement that I never pronounced the right way, so I won't try.
Stolpersteine.
Yes. Say it again.
Stolpersteine. The literal translation is stumbling stones.
Stumbling stones.
Yeah.
And the question is, was there your reasoning for concluding the film in that scene and at that place, and with the washing and the washing of those stones by Toby and Dimitri's reaction to that, was there a deeper meaning to being in that place and with those particular actions with the film?
No, of course, we can say this wasn't a coincidence that Toby is there and washing the stones. Of course not. You know what happens very often in Germany? Like people try to fight against present anti-Semitism, and they send kids to take care of a memorial site. So there is no, very often in German schools and also in like anti-Semitism in German school, there's no connection between the past and the present anti-Semitism. So a teacher thinks it's a good thing to send Toby to clean the stones and thinks he will understand what he actually did. Obviously, Toby doesn't. And yeah, so this was no coincidence. I don't know if I answered this question by that, but I would also say that like remembrance projects in Germany are, especially the Stumbling Stone project, yeah, Stolperstein project, is very much criticized also from like Jewish sides. You know, I don't know how much you know about it, but like it's a project by a non-Jewish German artist, Dutch artist. His name is Gunter Demlik, and he made this project his, like, you know, his life achievement, and he's going around whole Europe and putting down these memorial stones in places where Jews have lived or victims of the Shoah have lived. And it's quite a very much like commercial project. So he like makes a lot of money with the stones. He never opened it up for you know, for general, so that like everyone can put stumbling stones, more stones on the pavement who wants to. Also, it's very much you know, victim focused. So in general, you know, the culture of remembrance in Germany is very much victim focused. It's not focused on the perpetrators, it's only focused on the victims. You know, they expect like Jewish survivors of the Holocaust go around German schools and speak, and they're putting down the stones for them. And I think the main thing to understand here is that like the Shoah is so formative in like also like Jewish biographies that you don't have a choice. If you remember, you have to, right? So you can't really say, like, from German perspective, you can. So you can say, on this day, we're going to clean on the 27th of January, which is like the liberation of Auschwitz, which is like a Memorial Day in Germany. On the 27th of January, many people in Germany, they go and clean the stones for one day. And the rest of the year, we don't want to hear about it, you know? So most of the stones and memorials are made for the Germans. They're not made for the Jews. They're made for the fact that like Germans can clean it, and they can have something, you know, have a feeling of doing something good by putting down these memorials. And also what happens also very often, these memorial stones are only put into the pavement if there's someone who actually wants to do it and wants to pay it. So what happens, for example, in Cologne, the street where I was living, there were like 30 Jewish families living in the streets, right? But only in like 3 different spots, there were stones for them. Because in these 3 spots, someone had the idea to put down a stone. So it shifts the picture of actually how many Jews were living in the street very much to a little number. And it changes also the perspective and the perception of how many Jews were living in the street. So there's like massive criticism from the Jewish community also by saying, okay, people are walking on it, people are stepping on it, people are spitting on it, people are like, you know, they're very, very often there, like people putting swastikas on it, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think this was the idea behind this scene in general.
Wow, well, so much behind that scene, and thank you for that question. That really illuminates for us, I think, the film and so many of the issues. It reminded me very much of the teacher asking Dimitri to come to her class when actually she didn't know how to ask him or say the word Holocaust or Jew, but that he should come and talk about it. So very much like that.
Yeah.
Well, Arkadij, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know there's a big hand of applause here for you. We thought the film was fantastic. It is playing throughout our festival for the next, well, starting Sunday, but for the next 2 weeks. So a lot of people will have a chance to watch it, and we'll add the recording of our talk today, so they'll be able to hear some of the behind the scenes work and your thoughts about the film. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.